Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. This week, once again sponsored by Amazon Audible. I'm sure you all know the deal by now. You can always start listening with a free 30-day Audible trial with full access to thousands of all-you-can-listen audiobooks, original entertainment, and podcasts included in the Plus catalogue. Just visit audible.com/jingles or text jingles to 500 500. And this week I am very happy to recommend, with your free monthly Audible credit, Thunder Below by Admiral Eugene Fluckey, the story of the USS Barb, the submarine that not only sank more tonnage of Japanese ships during World War II than any other submarine in the US Navy, but also revolutionized the way submarine warfare was conducted.
1 June, time 1000. Now hear this. The cooks have completed a veritable masterpiece to celebrate the Barb sinkings yesterday of the Imperial Japanese Navy's Madras Maru and Koto Maru. Said culinary work of art is exhibited in the control room from now until 10:45, when it will be devoured. Permission is granted to photograph from a selected angle only to avoid revealing classified equipment. Further, the captain has been entrusted by the most considerate U.S. Navy with sufficient bourbon whiskey to provide 2 ounces to each man as a depth charge ration. Our captain believes that laws are made by men and can be changed by men. According to the general prudential rule, a captain at sea may render a departure from such rules necessary to avoid immediate danger. Thus, the captain has decreed the following. If we get depth charged, we kick each other in the tail. Whenever we sink a ship, we splice the main brace. Hip hip, hooray! The bar is now open. The cake, 3 feet square and 6 inches high, rested in front of the diving station with the cooks, James Beaugolais and Charles Doherty, sitting behind it. The multicolored frosting depicted a submarine firing torpedoes at 2 merchant ships flying the Japanese flag. One of the ships was broken in the middle like a V for victory as she sank. The other was sinking bow first. I was amazed that they could concoct such a cake. Bob suggested that Quito, our prisoner, be brought forward to see the cake before it was cut. Meanwhile, the men who were not abstainers lined up and received their ration of treasured sipping whiskey. Of course, each one had to check his name off on a muster list. Submariners are, by nature, sneaky. The officers received their tot of whiskey and headed for the wardroom for a few sea stories. Normally, at this hour, Bob held officers' school for 2 hours. This day was special, however. The Barb, as usual, stayed on the surface, sweeping back and forth near La Perouse in our never-ending hunt for the enemy.
So, yeah, that's kind of my morning routine now. In fact, most times I'm in the kitchen, cooking dinner or preparing food or whatever, because, I love reading, but I can't be reading a book while I'm, using my hands to prepare food, so it's just so convenient. Actually, funny old thing, I used to, because I really do love reading. When I worked at the Admiralty Interview Board, my last couple of years in the Royal Navy, at HMS Sultan, I only lived, 10, 12 minutes walk away. And I would read while walking on the way into work in the morning. And the amount of funny looks I got, which is understandable. Somebody's walking along the road with a book in their hand, face down into it. It was pretty dangerous, I suppose, but I love reading, and Audible wasn't a thing back then. But it is now. Anyway, enough about Audible. Let's crack on. So, what's happening today? Well, I'm not sure how long I'm going to have for this episode of Mingles with Jingles. I announced in last week's episode that Rita was giving up her flat and she was moving in with me again, which is just great because we're really good friends, and now if I want to go away and do anything, if I want to go on a road trip with my friend Roy up in Birmingham, I don't have to worry about getting somebody in to look after the cats because Rita's there, the cats know her, and she loves looking after them. And likewise, because previously when Rita would go away, whether that was visiting the USA or going on a tank show for the weekend, either Kristen would have to come, her cat, would have to come here, or I would have to go to Rita's house every day to feed Crystalline and give her fresh water, depending on how long she was going to be away. So this is just perfect. The only problem is, it's astonishing how much shit she's accumulated over the course of the last year in her flat. The amount of stuff she's got. And of course, she can't leave it there. It all has to be moved over. And, I mean, I've got the space, but since neither of us drive, neither of us have a car, we've had to rely on the kindness of incompetent camera Minnie and Eddie, who is, I have to say, incredibly kind. Most days he's got free. He, Rita, and I go over to her place, organise a bunch of stuff, stick it into boxes, and he drives us over here. But the clock is kind of ticking. There's a definite end date on when she has to be out of her old flat. So we're doing an awful lot of moving today. I might not have time to do a whole regular-sized episode of Mingles with Jingles, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, wow, I've actually done 5 minutes already just talking about how I might not have time to do it. Anyway, we'll crack on. So, one thing that I did want to talk about, it's World of Warships related, and it really took me by surprise, and I'll explain why. Do you recall, during the mass community revolt against World of Warships, which was probably about a year ago now, when basically all of the biggest community contributors upped sticks and quit, because, quite frankly, we were getting tired of wargaming shit. And they promised to do better. Do you remember? I know, you might have trouble picking out exactly which occasion we're talking about, because that's pretty much wargaming's standard method of operation. Abuse the community, push it to breaking point, and then when we finally snap, say, well, we hear your concerns, and we promise to communicate better in future, and then basically do nothing. Just carry on as normal. That's basically what they've been doing for the last 7 years. It's their standard operating practice now. Promise the earth and deliver nothing. And that's more or less exactly what I expected to happen probably about a year ago now, during the mass community revolt. That was triggered by, well, it was a lot of things coming to a head, but it was mostly triggered by the way Little White Mouse, possibly the greatest community contributor any game developer has ever had, the way she was treated by Wargaming, and that kind of was the straw that broke the camel's back. But there were a lot of other things going on. I mean, I could make you a list. Loot boxes, the increasingly aggressive monetization of stuff that we basically used to get for free just by playing the game, the aircraft carrier rework, a whole bunch of stuff that you could just list under Wargaming refusing to listen to the community and insisting that we don't know what we're talking about, despite all kinds of evidence to the contrary. And then there was the operations game mode in World of Warships was one of my particular hot topics, because I love playing operations. For those of you who don't play World of Warships, or who do and have never played operations, it's kind of like a PvE game mode. It's a bit like co-op battle, where it's players on one side and bots on the other side, but unlike in co-op battle, where the teams are mirrored and the bots are really, really stupid, and they basically just sail straight towards the nearest enemy ship, guns blazing. Operations revolved around scenarios, and I say revolved, past tense, and I'll explain why in a moment, where there's a specific objective that needs to be completed. For example, in Operation Raptor Rescue, there was an aircraft carrier that had been disabled and needed to be rescued, repaired, and then escorted out of the combat zone. In Defensive Naval Station Newport, it's exactly what it says on the tin. You're defending a naval station. And unlike in co-op battles, the teams aren't mirrored. So you will be facing a lot more than just what you have available on your team, which I think the player team is limited to 7 ships. So you're going to be heavily outnumbered. You might find yourself facing higher tier ships than are available on your team, and they're not always going to be coming from the same directions and in the same numbers. In fact, they might not even be the same types of ships every time you play. So there's a lot more variety to it. You have to think a bit more. And while the operations game mode was never as popular as random battles, there were a fair number of people who really enjoyed playing it. In fact, regularly on Sundays I would join up with the Bob's clan with TC Freer, and a whole bunch of us would get together and we just shoot the shit while playing the operations, and it was a lot of fun. But over time we started to notice some changes that were happening to operations, and they weren't good changes. For example, when the aircraft carrier rework came about, most of the higher tier operations that featured heavy use of aircraft just got removed from the rotation. Things like Operation Cherry Blossom, which was an all Tier 8 cruiser operation that featured the first night battles in World of Warships. But then when the sun came up, suddenly you came under air attack. That got removed. There were a couple of others that featured heavy use of aircraft. I think one was called Ultimate Frontier and the other one was Operation Hermes. And when the aircraft carrier rework happened, they weren't entirely sure how they were going to be able to balance the new aircraft mechanics around, because they were kind of small teams that you would play in. Like I said, I think the maximum number of ships available to a team in an operation was 7. And with all of these aircraft and the new aircraft mechanics, they felt it was just safer to pull these operations from the game rotation until they could balance them around the new aircraft mechanics. So we said, yeah, sure, no problem. Perfectly understandable. Give us a shout when they're back in. Well, this was nearly 3 years ago. Right? And these 3 higher tier operations, the more fun ones with the interesting new mechanics like night battles, never made it back in. And then we noticed other things started happening with operations, because it used to be the case, in fact, Operation Narai, which is the Tier 7 operation, used to be insanely profitable, way too profitable. I mean, you could farm credits and flags and all kinds of stuff way more efficiently in that operation than you could just by playing random battles. So there was some nerfs to the profitability, and that was absolutely fine. But at around about the same time, we noticed, hang on a second, how come I'm not getting my missions complete? So, your random combat missions and your daily combat missions, you used to be able to complete those in operations. And then suddenly you couldn't. And this doesn't happen by accident. Somebody at Wargaming has deliberately chosen to not allow you to complete missions in operations. You can complete them in co-op, where it's just your team against 12 of the dumbest bots known to man, and random battles, obviously, but suddenly you weren't allowed to complete them in operations anymore. So we started getting a bit suspicious. Wargaming, what's going on here? Oh, yeah, they said. Nobody really plays operations, so we're not going to support them anymore. Oh, so does this mean you're not going to be developing new operations? What about the 3 high-tier ones that featured lots of aircraft that we've been waiting, 2 years now for you to put back in? They said, well, it's just not cost-effective anymore because nobody plays operations, so we've just stopped supporting them. Yet, nobody plays operations because you fuckers are deliberately running operations into the ground by removing most of them, having the same 4 or 5 boring-ass operations in rotation for the last 3 years, refusing to update the rewards for completing the operations, deliberately removing the ability to complete daily and combat missions and campaigns in operations, and not updating the aircraft mechanics in order to put the 3 higher tier operations back in, which have been missing for the last 2 years as a result of the aircraft carrier rework. This is all stuff that you were either deliberately doing or deliberately not doing in order to be able to justify saying nobody plays operations, so it's not worth supporting it. Yet nobody plays them because of what you're doing to them. And you know this to be true. To which they said absolutely nothing and just, dodge the issue and refuse to give a straight answer, because that's what Wargaming do. And this is another one of the things that Wargaming promised, like nearly a year ago now, or possibly more than a year ago, I'm not entirely sure of the timeline, but a long ass time ago during the last massive community revolt, along with a whole bunch of other things that they said they would improve and do better in future. Now, to give them credit, some of the things that they said they would get right, they have actually done. Things like publishing the drop rates on loot boxes, things like that. But I didn't expect operations to ever get a fresh lease of life. I fully expected this to be just another one of those things that they said, yeah, we'll do better, just to get everybody to shut the hell up and then sweep it under the carpet and pretend it never existed, as they have done with so many other things in the past. So imagine my surprise when I saw the development blog post dated the 4th of August talking about the World of Warships 7th anniversary battleship minigame, closed testing and updated operations. Oh, whoa, hang on a second. I had to do a double take here. Updated operations? let me take a closer look. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other stuff in this dev blog post, obviously, World of Warships 7th anniversary, but coming up in the next patch, patch 0.11.8, this is happening. Now, bear in mind, what I expected Wargaming to do was nothing and just wait for everybody to forget about all the promises that they made. What I hoped Wargaming were going to do was address the aircraft mechanic issue with the higher tier operations that they pulled, fix them, and put them back in the rotation. And maybe, if I was a very, very good boy, I ate all my dinner and did all my homework, maybe reinstate the ability to complete combat missions in operations. But that was like, I wasn't expecting that. But just put the old operations back in so we don't have the same 4 tier 6 and 1 tier 7 operation that have been the only ones left in rotation for the last 3 years. What they are actually doing in the next patch is so much more than that. Honestly, I'm having to double check, and this is Wargaming, right? What's going on? Where's the catch? So let me explain exactly what's happening in the next patch with the updated operations. So, and I'm quoting more or less directly from the dev blog here. In update 0.11.8, we have updated all operations in our game so that players can participate in operations on more of their favourite ships and earn valuable rewards for it. Because previously in operations, depending on how many stars you completed the mission with, you would earn rewards, but you could only ever earn those rewards once. So as soon as you'd 5-starred the operation, there was no economic incentive for you to ever go back and do the same operation again. However, now tier 6 to 8 ships will be able to go into battle together at the same time, and the final composition of the team going in will affect the strength of the bots and the post-match earnings. So previously, and for pretty much the last 3 years, there have been 4 operations for tier 6 ships and 1 operation for tier 7 ships. The tier 8 operations were the ones that got shit-canned in the wake of the aircraft carrier rework. So you were constantly playing just an entire team of tier 6 or tier 7 ships. But now you can pick any ship of tier 6, 7 or 8, and the matchmaker will put you into teams consisting of tier 6, 7 and 8 ships, and it will scale the opposition in each operation relative to the strength of the player team going in. So that's fantastic. It means you can take your tier 8 battleships into what used to be tier 6 missions, and the enemies will scale accordingly. Also, the economics of operations are changing. Previously, and I mentioned this just now, but I'm quoting from the dev blog again, after completing an operation, a player earned a variable number of stars based on performance, the rewards for which could only be received once. Now the stars will be removed entirely, and rewards can instead be earned by completing special daily and weekly combat missions specifically designed for operations, which will give community tokens as a reward. So they've addressed 2 of the concerns there straight away. The fact that once you'd 5-starred a mission in operations, there was no economic point for you to ever bother doing it again, and the fact that they had removed the ability to complete combat missions in operations. Well, they've basically fixed that in one go. So now you get your own operation-specific combat missions, in addition to the existing combat missions that you can do every day, and there's an incentive for you to do these operations more than once because you don't just earn the rewards once. And finally, and if they'd just done this, I would have been happy, but this is now just the icing on the cake on top of everything else that they've done. Together with the update of the operations mode itself, 3 operations will return in update 0.11.8. Ultimate Frontier, Hermes, and Cherry Blossom. So, pretty much, in fact, I think the only operation that isn't coming back in the next patch is the Dunkirk operation, which was kind of a special event anyway, where you were escorting transport ships, pulling troops off the shores of Dunkirk. And that was kind of a special event anyway. It was destroyers only. It was a fun operation to play. It featured minefields, another new mechanic that has only ever existed in operations. But you know what? I'm not even complaining, because this is amazing news. I mean, if all they'd done was put those 3 high-tier operations, Ultimate Frontier, Hermes, and Cherry Blossom, back into the game, I would have been happy. because Cherry Blossom in particular was amazing. It was a cruiser-only operation, Tier 8 Allied cruisers only. The opposition was the Imperial Japanese Navy. It started with a night battle, another game mechanic that has only ever appeared in operations, and only in this one operation, Cherry Blossom, where you were defending Marine regiments on the shore from bombardment at night. You had to avoid flares, because if you got lit up by a flare, you would get focused down by the Japanese Navy. And then you would have to take the counterattack to the Japanese fleet as soon as dawn broke, when you would get aircraft carrier support. You'd have to defend your carrier against waves of land-based aircraft. It was all just... it was fun. And it's back. And that's not all. They're getting rid of the whole operation of the week mechanic as well, because that was another thing that just conspired to make ops really, really boring. Because if you weren't in a division and you selected the operation button, you would get put into the operation of the week, which meant for an entire week it was the same operation over and over and over and over. And the only way of being able to pick an operation was to make a division of at least, I think, 6 players. The division size in World of Warships is limited to 3, but with the operations game mode selected, you could fill bigger divisions. So you could get an entire division of 7 of your friends, and this is what we used to do on Sundays, so we didn't have to play the same operation of the week over and over and over. And they're getting rid of that as well. In update 0.11.8, there will no longer be an operation of the week. When playing with a matchmaker selected team, so, without a division and just taking your chances, the operation scenario itself will be randomly selected. So, the exact opposite of playing the same operation for the whole week. You might never get the same operation twice in a row, in the same way that you might never get the same random battle map twice in a row, but it will still be possible to choose which scenario you play when entering battle as part of a division. Who are you, and what have you done with the real wargaming? I mean, they said they would revisit operations and try to take into account some of our concerns. And I expected them to do nothing, to just promise us the earth, just to get us to shut up. And it honestly looked like this was exactly what was happening, because it's been about a year now since they made these promises. But they're following through on every single promise that they made, at least as far as operations are concerned. So, wow. Colour me impressed. So, I'm really looking forward to the next patch in World of Warships. It's been a long time since I've been able to say that. Because, let's just say, most of the recent changes over the last 6 months to a year in World of Warships I haven't been a particularly great fan of. Submarines probably been the biggest example, but yeah. What can I say? Credit where credit's due. It's not often we get to give Wargaming credit, so it's only fair that I do when they deserve it. Also, just before we finish, in completely different news, Alien Fireteam Elite has... it's getting some new content. I don't really know what they're calling it, but it's all kind of based on the new Alien movies, Covenant and Prometheus and so on and so on. And I'm not such a fan of the new movies, but if it's new content for a really, really good game that suffers from a lack of content, like Alien Fireteam Elite, I'm all in. Plus, they also just dropped a massive content patch introducing new weapons, new weapon attachments, new challenge cards, a prestige system, and the ability to recycle existing challenge cards that are garbage and you're never going to use for a chance of actually getting something that you might actually use. So it's been a pretty good month. New content for, well, not new content, technically sort of revamped old content being put back into the game in the form of new content for World of Warships, all kinds of new content for Aliens Fireteam Elite, and to be honest, I do still actually play Aliens Fireteam Elite most days. I'll log in for the daily missions. And more new stuff in the shape of a new DLC coming out at the end of this month to stretch its legs a little further is only a good thing. So yeah, on balance, I have to say I'm pretty happy with my gaming this month, and things are only going to start getting better when patch 0.11.8 drops in World of Warships. So that's it for today. I hope you found something interesting there to think about, or perhaps talk about in the comments. And as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.